Hi, welcome back to another painting tutorial. In this video, we're going to paint this crab, and it's a beautiful blue crab. I think that's how they are naturally. We see them red because that's when we eat them and they're boiled, that's why they're red in color. So we're going to be working on this side of the color wheel, some beautiful blues, greens, and yellows. So let's start with adding in our darkest values. And I want to do that using a round brush. This is a size 10 round brush. So get your brush wet. And I want to, for the darkest tone, I want to mix a little bit of Payne's Gray, which leans a little bit blue. And I want to mix that with some of this phthalo blue. And just kind of mix that together to get a nice dark tone. And then I want to go ahead and add that along the crab where I see it in the reference photo. So in these kind of spiky parts here, it's pretty dark. And these round brushes are great because they give you a nice point so you can be pretty exact with where you're putting things. And then I want some darker tone here in the middle of the body. I can add a little bit more water onto the brush so that this blends a little better and moves across the page more easily. And I want the center of the crab to have this darker shade because I'm thinking about the focal point, and I want the focal point of the painting to be the middle, the center of the crab. Okay, and then where else? So let's take a little bit more Payne's Gray, a little bit more phthalo blue, mix that together to get our darkest value. And let's put it, we can put it in other parts of the crab. I want to put it in some of these lines. Just quickly put it in between kind of like the joints of the legs of the crab. And you can go around the outside of the claw, around the outside edges of the legs. This kind of makes an outline and helps to define the image. Just keeps, so we're kind of going over the sketch lines. And if you want to get this photo, if you want to trace it, if you're not comfortable drawing free-handed, you can trace this and you can find it on my Pinterest board. Right now, that's where I've been posting all of my reference photos for the time being, so you should be able to find that. Okay, so that's just I'm kind of drawing with the brush almost, just sketching with the tip of that round brush. Okay, and we are working on a toned paper, so that's going to help us with giving some color to the under painting. So we don't really need to do much of an under painting. Okay, so that looks good. All right, now let's move to our mid-tone. So let's think about what we want to do for that. Let's take a cerulean blue and mix it with a little bit of green, or mix it with teal or green, and you know green and blue make a teal shade. And let's see what color that gives us. So that is a pretty, it looks very teal. So I want to neutralize it a little bit. I don't want it to be super teal. So let's try putting maybe some ultramarine blue, which is a warmer blue, and see what that does. And it looks to be about the same shade. So what we can do is let's try taking the opposite of that color. So the opposite of a blue is going to be a yellow. So let's take this yellow ochre mix it into the blue, and then see what color that gives us. So it's a little bit more on the green side, and you can see that it toned it down a little bit and it made it look a little bit more of a natural color, and that's what we wanted. So just that yellow ochre mixed with teal, mixed with a blue, just gives us a little more of a natural teal shade. Okay, so we're just putting that on the legs and filling in some of these white spots that we had. Okay, and let's put some along the claws. If you need to, oops, it's okay. If you need to, you can put your hand down to kind of give you some support so that your hand is a little more steady. I know that's hard for me to do sometimes in the video, but when I want to do a painting with a lot of detail, I really have to put that arm down, give myself some stability, and then I'm able to get a little bit more precise with my strokes, my brush movements. You saw we made that little spot right there. It kind of dropped or a drip, and that's okay if we did that. We could even make it as a part of the painting. I could add some more splashes and make it look like it was intentional. So if that ever happens to you when you're painting, don't worry about it. It actually can give you like a nice look. Okay, so I'm just kind of filling in these legs with this teal that we mixed up. Okay, and that looks about done. Okay, so now at this point, let's go back in with some straight yellow ochre. And if you see in the reference photo, there's some parts of the crab that is kind of greenish. And go ahead and just put that in on top of that teal. So it's almost like a glaze. And it's giving us just a cool look. So we're just building form at this point. You know, it might be the ugly stage of the painting, but we're just building the color and adding different colors together so it's a little bit more dynamic. Okay, so I like the way that's looking. That yellow ochre really tones down the color and makes everything look a little more realistic, which I like. Okay, so then let's add a little bit more color to the claws at the top, and let's try to take just a plain cerulean blue and see what happens if we add that on top. And you can see in the reference photo, it's a pretty bright shade of blue. So let's just add that in. Okay. And then it comes under here, it's pretty bright blue, and then over here, it's a pretty bright blue, and then we can add that into the body as well, just to give a little bit of cohesion with the painting. So the other legs, I don't want to give as much attention and detail to these other legs because I want those to kind of disappear into the background because they're not our main focal point. So let's add a little bit of white. I want to make a highlight at this point. So let's do some white with some violet and use that as a highlight color and put that right here to make that claw look three-dimensional. Okay, and then very slightly with the tip of your brush, you can put it along the middle of that claw, and that'll make that look three-dimensional as well. And then over here, we can add that white. Remember this titanium white, it's very opaque, so it's gonna show up fairly strong has a fairly strong color. And I'll just put a little bit on the bottom legs, and that's just going to diffuse that into the background a little bit. And then let's put a little bit here, just as we're seeing it on the reference. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So at this point, you can go ahead and add some details and look at these kind of spikes. We could add that, we could use a burnt umber to add those spikes. So you can see them over here. Oops, I got a little bit too much water. So just take that tip of your round brush and just try to add some spikes in there. You could even put this color in between the joints. And again, make sure that you have it in different places throughout the painting. Let's put some up here along the top, the head of the crab. Okay. So we have these beautiful analogous colors, the yellow, the green, and the blue. Like I said, they're all close to each other on that color wheel, so that's why they complement each other so well and they look really nice. Okay, so I think that looks good. At this point, I would maybe do a little bit more with highlighting. So you could try a lemon yellow mixed with a little bit of titanium white and see what get kind of a pale yellow highlight, which is always a very bright and beautiful highlight that you can use in your work. And let's put that, dance that around the top and just use that as a highlight shade of where it might look nice. And looking at the reference photo will also tell you where you could put it. Okay, so I think that looks pretty good, and that's probably going to dry a little bit darker, which is fine. And then I'm kind of losing the spikes a little bit, these two on the ends here. So what you could do is take some Payne's Gray and just put those back in this very darkest Payne's Gray, and this should be the darkest value that we have in the painting. And I may bring it into this area a little bit as well, and maybe to the front here, and just you can see how that just adds quite a bit more definition to the piece because there's more tone and more value. And then if I wanted to put a highlight in there, I could just take a little bit of this violet color and then put that down the middle and on both sides, and you can see that just gives it a little bit of a three-dimensionality. Okay, so I think that looks good. So at this point, you would want to kind of let that dry. Before we do that, let's actually, that little mistake that we made where we dropped some things, let's maybe put some other drops on there. And I would say you want to do an odd number of drops and try to make them look random. And then let's maybe drop like some water spots on top of that. You want to use odd numbers when you're painting things because that's the way that they appear in nature. And if the eye only sees two objects or an even number of objects, it tends to bounce around between those objects instead of just having more of a closed loop in the mind when there's an odd number, if that makes sense. Okay, so now that that's dried a little bit, what we can do is take your spotting tool and put a little bit of that titanium white on the end. If you look at the reference photo, there's these really pretty little spots and speckles around the crab. So try to put those in different sizes and try to do it very randomly again so that it appears natural. And I love the way this looks It's almost reminds me of stars or constellation on the crab, so it's just makes it a little bit magical, and you can add that into your painting. Okay, so I think that's finished. So that's a fun little sketch of a summer crab, another beach project for you to try out this summer. Okay, so thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!